I'm Andrea Butcher, and this is Being at Work. Being a leader is hard. So on this show, I set out to talk with experienced leaders to learn from their pivotal moments, how they led through the challenges we can all relate to but are often unheard. On today's episode, I am connecting with Jim Morris, President, CEO at Greater Indianapolis Habitat for Humanity. Jim has a passion for growing organizations through an entrepreneurial spirit, visionary outlook, and outcomes-based strategic planning. He has 29 years of experience in both the profit and nonprofit sectors, serving in a variety of executive positions. Jim has a gift for finding resources to deliver results and has raised millions from grants, sponsorships, and individual donors. He embraces an abundance mentality and fosters a spirit of optimizing outcomes through shared vision and collaboration. Early in his career, he recognized a great passion for missional work and followed the yearning he felt with a lot of learning along the way. The story that Jim highlights today is a valuable example of the fact that failure is where you grow. Check it out.
My journey would definitely not be linear. It was one in which I actually graduated as an undergrad in journalism, and upon graduation realized, that's not exactly what I want to do. I learned a lot and appreciated the education, which leans towards a liberal arts kind of education in journalism. And so I was sort of in this place of, now what? And mom and dad were kind of like, yes, now what? You just went through 4 years of college. And so I kind of landed in this space of not knowing exactly what was next. I was actually invited to come into the residential building and development industry, really through sales. And so I took it at age 23. You need to find work after graduating. So I jumped in, and I was not somebody who was naturally inclined to know and be a salesperson per se, but the training actually was incredibly valuable around the sales process. And I learned and understood just what that meant, and that essentially in any role, you're selling not only yourself, but you're selling. And so it was a great foundational training for me to move forward. And at the same time, I had never been introduced to residential building and construction. You definitely didn't want me building your house with my lack of skill set, but I really grew a passion for helping guide families, particularly young families, through that process of purchasing their first home. There was something in there, and that teaching and training and guiding so that they would be successful, that there was a seed plant there. And that obviously come full circle in the role that I'm in now, exercising what we do with our mission has really, in looking back, when you can look back to your journey and see that that was a vital time for me to learn about that and to understand that this was something I actually had a passion for. And there was always a yearning that I had inside to answer the question that I wanted to do something that was a little more missional based. I had been in residential building and construction in the profit world, and built and worked in homes that were $1 million to $5 million. And it wasn't quite what really made me come alive. And so moving to a missional based approach and learning that that's really where my passion lied was part of that journey. So I moved into the nonprofit sector. I actually did not start with Habitat for Humanity. I started in arts and culture and economic development as a part of my intro into nonprofit. So I've got a more comprehensive experience in nonprofit. But where I am now really brings together both my passion for guiding families into successful home ownership and really helping fulfill the missional desire that I have inside.
How did you come to realize that passion?
Boy, in describing, there was just an emptiness that wasn't being answered for me internally. It lingered. I almost early on in my mid 20s didn't know what it was. And early, I often, that non-linear path that I described, it actually, it sort of, I was comparing myself to peers, to friends who were on a more linear path and were becoming what I considered more successful early in their careers. And that yearning inside me that I didn't quite understand was guided by connecting with a mentor, and that mentor helping to call that out in me that maybe my path would be a little different, and to accept that this is a journey that you're on, and comparing. So he helped me guide past comparing to others and focusing on answering what was inside me.
So, what did you do with that when you came to recognize that, oh, I've got a passion here, a yearning that's not being fulfilled?
Yeah, the first thing I did is jumped on a board. I had never participated in the nonprofit sector at all at that point, and so I started by serving on a board. This was an arts and cultural organization. Lived in Orlando at the time, Indiana born, but we had moved to Orlando for my wife's work actually, and so I served on this board, and it was a an opening to understanding that world, and in so much as kind of a training ground. And that particular organization, their executive director took another position, and the board actually turned to me and asked me if I wanted the role. And so that was my first entry point into leading. It was a small nonprofit in terms of budget size, but it was making a big impact in arts and culture and economic development in Orlando. And so I jumped at the chance. I was 32 years old and had no idea what I was doing in terms of leading, but had been given this privilege to figure it out. And when I look back, that's a really big privilege to have been given this leadership mantle, and at the same time not had that experience, and being given the freedom to figure it out. And I dove in just incredibly with a lot of energy. To my learning curve was pretty steep, but I took classes, I read, I dove in to train myself professionally on what it would take to be a good leader in that space.
Yeah, so let's break this down because this is really interesting. You were on this non-linear path, not feeling fulfilled, recognized a yearning inside of you. So you reached out to others through a mentor who really helped you shape what you are passionate about. You made the decision to jump on a board, which also took some courage, didn't it? I mean, that no doubt pushed you out of your comfort zone in a way because that was new. That was your entry point into the nonprofit world. And you said, I had no idea what I was doing. I just love the courageous spirit though, in following your passion, not knowing where it would lead you, but the opportunity that came from that was incredible.
Yeah, the fact too that I had no arts training whatsoever. I have a wife who's incredibly gifted artistically, and we both appreciate the arts, and especially the role that the arts play in our community. And yet, I had no experience fully, but I had a real the passion for the people, the artists themselves. Even though I didn't consider myself an artist, I was welcomed into this space to support and to guide, and again that training aspect of not only for my own self, but I was allowed to ultimately figure it out by making some mistakes as a leader at that time, and learning from those, and helping guide the organization through those. So yes, it was something that at the time I was even asking, okay, is this me, or is this? So it was answering that, and stepping into that role was really a catalyst to everything that moved forward from there.
Yeah, adversity introduces us to ourselves. And so you were no doubt through those challenges, you were learning all kinds of things about yourself.
The learning about yourself, at the same time understanding and being opened for the first time to answering that yearning that was inside, and realizing that, hey, this fits. This definitely fits in many ways. And yet, having, at 32, 33 years old, having a ton to figure out in terms of how do I get better at this? How do I do this well on behalf of those that we're serving? That particular part of also excited me in trying to just get better at it.
Yeah, and to grow through it. So you said that you figured it out by making a lot of mistakes, as we all do. And I know that that's something that you highlight as a important part of your leadership journey is just how much you have grown through as you reflect back now through what you consider some failures and some challenging moments. And I know there's one situation in particular, Jim, that really taught you a lot about your leadership and who you are. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, while I was in this role as executive director for the Arts Organization in Orlando, there's a college that's called Rollins, similar in size to, say, Butler here locally, and they offered a full ride scholarship for their executive MBA program. And that really piqued my interest. I was wanting, that was for me, the quantitative skills, the understanding how to better run an organization. And I saw that as just a key opportunity for me to excel in a new way. So I applied for that scholarship, and I was quite confident that even though I wouldn't consider myself the smartest person in the room when it comes to understanding the business practices that you'd be trained in an MBA, I felt like I had a strong position. They had actually never provided that scholarship for an arts and cultural nonprofit executive, but I didn't get it. So there was a nice humbling moment there that transpired, and you could reapply the following year. There was no limit to how many times you could apply. And I thought, okay, I need to do this again. I need to apply. I didn't really put a ton of effort into it though. In the second application, I felt like I think I was still carrying some of the woe is me. I should have gotten it the first time, and it didn't get it again. So they gave it to another executive who I thought, wow, I feel comparable to that leader. Why was I not chosen? It came around again, and in this third time, I really felt like I need to exercise what my strengths are. I need to do what I know I do best, and that's building relationships. That's connecting to people. And so I just went into the admin office and said, "This is something I really want to do. What will it take for me to do it?" And I remember being encouraged that you need to show them that you want it, and you need to show them why you think it's important to you. And so the actual judges, if you will, or those who actually critiqued the applications for approval were past recipients of the scholarship. And so there were probably, I don't know, 15 to 20 past recipients, and I reached out to all of them in some capacity back then. And I called them. I set up some coffee with probably a half dozen of them and asked them questions. I pressed in on the fact that not only did I want this scholarship, but I wanted to understand what it was like. And I did an inquiry-based conversation with each of them to try to explore what would I be getting into if I were, been given this great opportunity. And in all of those efforts, I just wanted to make sure that I exhausted everything I knew well to do. And I did end up getting the scholarship after that third try. The adage of, third time's a charm actually played out. But that in and of itself for me was, hard work is often expressed, work hard, and the fruit will be seen from that work. So that moment really proved that to be true. But it also validated that really being who you are and exercising those strengths, even when you may not feel like you've got maybe the strengths in areas that you feel like you want to grow in, but exercise the ones you have. And it proved well for me. I was in a class of other professionals that it was a 2-year program, and I learned a tremendous amount from being with other peers. I was the only nonprofit executive amongst probably 30 people that, whose average age at that time, I was 39 years old. And so it was about that age group of professionals. And so it was it was a big leap for me to dive in. And I felt, fairly overwhelmed initially because I was taking in, particularly on the quantitative side of learning, and yet it was incredibly helpful to me in learning how to improve and do what I do better.
Yeah, so an important part of your journey in the just the education and the relationships you built. So I get why it was so important to you. I want to go back to the second time you applied because you said something really interesting. You said you were still caring, so you didn't get it first time you applied, and then the second time it came around, you were still carrying this "woe is me." Like what was it that you think most impacted your not getting selected that second time?
I think a little bit. If I was if I was on the outside, one of the assessment, those who are actually critiquing, there was just minimal effort. I didn't put in that full effort, and I knew it. I knew I sort of just dialed it in a little bit and sent in the application because I didn't want to miss not applying, but I knew in my own heart that I didn't put a full effort in. And
So did you expect to get the scholarship that
no,
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 you did
no,
not
I didn't
expect
expect to
it.
get. No, in the end, I can remember turning it in and thinking this was a wasted effort. I think it fulfilled the you put in the application, you showed you came back a second year to do this, but it wasn't a full out effort. And that in that humbling moment in that first year when I thought, oh, this is something that I should be able to obtain. Also, I think I don't know if it was you'd exactly call it grieving necessarily, but it was that humility side played itself out. That in that second application, it was a half-hearted effort, and I also learned from that as well. That yes, you can take some lumps, but moving on to understanding that it's going to happen. You're going to actually be able to get back up and learning about how you handle failure in that moment. I'm very thankful for that second application, quite frankly. That lack of effort that I put in showed me, hey, when you exhaust yourself, even if I hadn't gotten the scholarship, I would have been satisfied. Not obviously in the same way that I was by earning that scholarship, but I knew that I put in everything I had, and being satisfied with that kind of effort was something I learned out of that exercise as well.
Yeah, of course, because then it's much more meaningful. It's a much more meaningful accomplishment. Well, and you said earlier, you said that third time you leveraged your strengths. You most definitely did not do that the second time because you were just going through the motions. So yeah, so then you get the acknowledgement after leveraging your strengths and putting yourself into it. Gosh, that's what it's about, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the real value of working through challenges. It's such a great story. Did you recognize when you were having those meetings? Let's talk a little bit about that. You reached out to all of them and you said you had the third time you applied, you reached out to the people that ultimately were making the decision because you wanted them to know how important this was to you, that this was something that you really wanted. Did you know when you were meeting with them, did you expect the outcome that you would get the scholarship? Like, what were you thinking through that process?
I think it started to reveal itself as I started to have these conversations because I was learning about what efforts they put in, what they took away from obtaining their MBA in the executive program. How did it impact their work in the nonprofit sector? All of these things, I was in learning mode. So I actually sort of did not. I was taking the focus somewhat off of me. I went into this space of real learning, and so I was gaining knowledge and this wisdom really from these past recipients that was going to be beneficial either way. But it was probably halfway through, I might have been third or fourth meeting that I started to understand, well, this is me. I am actually in a space that I know. So the confidence was definitely there. And they were getting to know me and the passion, and they understood that I was going to take this and truly use it for the benefit of whatever mission I was in. So yeah, I think being able to share me essentially and was really part of that process that catapulted and really took off.
Yeah. And again, such a different approach from the second time you applied, right? This time, like you wanted to learn, you wanted to grow, you wanted to understand, and no doubt that shined through. Did you hear after you were given the scholarship, did you hear from any of them like about your approach and the impact that it had?
Yeah, and both from the admissions person, who I credit for the encouragement, quite frankly, said, yeah, they knew you did exactly what you said you were going to do, and there was a collective sort of great job. We know you're going to do well by it, kind of moment as well. So all of it sort of came together in a very nice moment for me in that part of my journey.
Yeah, it's such a good reminder of the spirit in which you're showing up and what you're bringing to a situation or a circumstance. This is something that you wanted. You went for it. You didn't get the scholarship. So you were a bit bitter about that. That showed up then in the second time you applied. And then you decided to take a different approach, right? You leaned into really what you wanted to get out of it, which was learning, and that drove your approach the third time. So then, not surprisingly, like it came around.
Yeah, and even that carried me forward into the because it's a lot. I mean, I was working a full time job when I started. It was in August start, I believe, and we just had my daughter who was only 3 months old at the time, so she was our second. So we were, in this space, and then I had to go to school at the same time. So it really provided the energy for me to do this well and to not just for myself. I felt a part of this sort of collegial group of past recipients that I needed to honor their belief in me. So I needed to make sure that I gave everything I had into that effort as well, because I didn't want this to be a letdown, not only for myself, my family, but also for this group that believed in me.
Yeah, there's such a good connection here between like, following your passion, like showing up with a spirit of learning and openness, and then when it doesn't go so well, like really looking at what you can learn and showing up differently. Like that's what you've modeled throughout this experience that you just shared throughout your journey. You talked earlier about the recognizing the yearning. You said that a couple of times, and everyone can relate to that, right? And I think there are a lot of emerging leaders that are on a linear path that feel that yearning that you described. You recognized that and had a mentor, fortunately, that was able to help you talk through that and think through that. What advice would you give to emerging leaders who are in a role that isn't quite fulfilling and that are feeling that yearning that you described? What do you think are some good steps?
Well, I think self reflection is important first. Understanding, trying to dig a little deeper into where that's coming from. It may be that, in my case, it was because I needed to be more missionally focused as a primary part of my professional role. That may not necessarily be the yearning, but something's in there that needs a question answered. So pressing in, and there are plenty of tools out there to self reflect on a little bit of more of the who am I, whether it's, it seems like, you can do Myers Briggs, you can do DISC, you can, a strengths finder, you can, the Enneagram's popular, there's all of these different tools out there to just get a better sense of who you are so you can dig deep into the question. And then I think pursuing a mentor, somebody whose voice has experience, is incredibly valuable so that you've done the self reflection, but you can have an outsider, somebody who's looking at you and cares about your interests, who can listen and reflect back on what they see as well, because you need that as part of that exploration, really, was incredibly valuable and still is today. I still retain somebody that I go to now, as I believe it's incredibly powerful in our continual space of learning, that it's very valuable in that space. So those two things I think are primary. If part of the yearning is specific to the work itself, I'm in a sector that I don't particularly appreciate, exploring obviously other industries. And what I found, particularly Indianapolis, I think is just fantastic for this, is people want to talk and engage with each other, and they're welcoming and they're open to this inquiry-based kind of conversation. If you've got specific yearnings or questions for those who are already in that industry, reaching out and when your heart is about learning, people are very open to teaching and talking about what they do and providing guidance or providing other ways for you to explore that.
Yeah, people want to help. They want to help and lift people up. Yeah, so really good takeaways, self-reflection, having trusted advisors that can help you talk through how best to use your strengths and follow your passion. Really great takeaways. Jim Morris, thank you so much for being a guest on our show.
I appreciate this. This was fantastic. I appreciate you inviting me in.
If our listeners want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Email is always something that I respond to. So that's jmorris@indyhabitat.org.
Great. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast to never miss a Being at Work story.